Welcome back. I did a few things off camera just to expedite this project for the sake of time and whatnot, and computer memory. One of the things I noticed as I was fitting the wooden box parts around the base of this skull was the rear edge of the skull right here was fitting a little too close to the wood. I didn't want it so close that it would create a weakened wall space here at the rear of the skull. So what I did, quite simply, I brought over the previously made clay base from the smaller of the two skulls. Okay, I took my cutter, my big clay cutter, and I cut a section off like so, then spliced it into place on the clay at the rear of this skull. What this did was give me a little more of a shelf behind the skull, and that was required. I then filled it in around the edges. I brought up, you may remember from the previous video, this corner was quite collapsed over here, so I brought that up to size, to equal height all the way around. Okay, the next step is to quickly, I'm going to try and work quickly on this section here today. I'm going to apply some water-based clay to the front of the skull, the nasal cavity area, and the seams down the front. I'm not going to use a lot, just enough to fill this in. I don't want to make really tight contact against the interior nasal septum bones, so I'm going to keep it pretty simple, pretty quick and pretty simple. Similar to what we did the first time, I'm just going to take a blob of clay, put it here, a little bigger blob then, put it here, swipe it up, continue that over the seams, pressing it into the seams as I go. My finger, I'm going to shape it away so that the nasal cavity is indented from the rest of the skull, as it should be. I want it to look fairly natural. Now, dip my fingers in water slightly and just simply smooth this. And as I smooth it, I take away the excess. Okay? And you can see how much clay has filled in this seam, quite a bit. Now, if this much clay can fill in this seam, then you can well imagine how much silicone would have soaked into this seam and caused the problem. Now I'm just going to wet the clay again, and with a little piece of paper towel, press that down as we go. Same thing with the front of the nasal cavity. I want to smooth this, so lightly going to wet it, and with a piece of paper towel, I'll lift this guy up, bring in the paper towel, wipe some away, wipe down with my finger. I want to try and get a nice smooth transition, and I want any excess clay removed. Now wipe it off the oil-based clay. A bit of water will dissolve that right off. Get a brush and brush it away. There we go. Brushing the water-based clay off of the oil-based clay. So now we have right there I've gone ahead and filled in some other key areas. Another little spot that I want you to take notice, and this is going to require some treatment. Right here, where there's a little chip of bone, there's a little bone chip right here, and that creates a porous surface. Same thing here, same thing on the underside of the top piece. It's a little bit of a porous surface right there. Now, if you're using a thin silicone that has a long set time, it is conceivable that the bone will absorb the silicone through these roughened areas. In cases like that, you simply take a little bit of your water-based clay. There are two ways to handle this, actually. One is with water-based clay. All right. You take a little water-based clay and you fill this in. Just like so. Just a little touchdown is all you need. Okay. A little water. Bring this closer here. A little water. Smooth it. Again, you're sealing the surface. All right. This here is good now. I'm looking for any other openings that need to be sealed. The rear corners of the eye socket that contain the openings for the optic nerve. Make sure those are properly sealed again. Remember, the clay dried a bit and pulled away. So we're simply refilling those openings with water-based clay. Okay. There we go. And there we are. Remember how these had little disturbances in the clay? You can now see where fresh clay has been applied to the rear of the eye socket. I'm going to do the same on this side. You see the openings in the clay. They will now be sealed as well. A little smear of clay here. Like so. This is the final prep work before we start closing it in the wooden box and then pour the silicone. There and there. A little water on a brush. In we go. Smooth it. And we're ready for the next step. Okay, everything else has been securely sealed with water-based clay, including this little crack along the top of the right eye socket area. Now, before we continue on, a real quick tip. This is a large amount of clay, okay? More than I'll be using in a while. So the way to keep, one of the ways to keep this from drying out is to put it in a zipper closed plastic bag, okay? Another thing that you can do with it, after you've put it into an airtight bag, put it in the freezer. It's not going to hurt it. It's water-based. It will freeze solid. It will thaw. If you want, you can cut it into smaller sized chunks, wrap it in plastic, then put it in an airtight bag, then put it in the freezer. Okay? All right, the next thing that needs to be done, I'm going to take the wooden walls for my mold box, and I'm going to put them in place. But before I completely close them in, I want to make sure the clay fits tight. So while I've got access like so, I'm going to press the clay in towards the walls of the box. Now, with a wooden box such as this, you can do that. With foam core, you're limited as to the amount of pressure you want to apply. Okay? All right. So that's fitting snug there. This back wall is fitting snug. I made sure of that. And this wall fits snug as well. All right, now we had a little turn up on this. This edge here turned up a bit. I don't know if you can see that. It actually turned up. So before the wall's in place, I must have banged it with my finger or a tool or something. I'm just going to press down a little bit and put the wall in place, and then press against the clay from the outside. Now I'll go in and I'll do the same exact thing I just showed you. I'm simply going to press against the clay and the wood box. Okay, we've got a good fit for the next step. I'm going to remove the box. Next thing to do is to create a lot of locking keys so that the upper part of the mold will lock to the underside of the mold that will be made at a later time. Well, after the first part is completed. You can use many different things for this. You can use the tips of brush handle, paintbrush handles. You can use the base of a marking pen, in this case a Sharpie marking pen. I can use the tip of this one modeling tool, this one wooden modeling tool I have that has a nice rounded tip to it. You can also use a pencil eraser, okay, to create little hollows. Also, another item I found is real handy are these from Walnut Hollow, these Hobbywood buttons. These are turned wooden buttons. Okay. These make a locking point and are really useful. And I'll show how we use several of these different items. Okay. The first thing I'm going to do is make a little indentation in the four corners. And I'm going to use the Sharpie, the base of the Sharpie marker for this. All right. Okay. Now, in the corner, in each corner where I just made that little mark, I'm going to press one of these wooden buttons into the clay, and I'm going to show how far in it goes. Right there, you see that? There we are. That overhang of the mushroom top actually helps create a locking point for the silicone. The silicone poured over the top section will come up, form underneath here. If need be, use a modeling tool to knock, or a piece of wire, or even to knock out some of the air, and it will form a cap. When the bottom portion is poured in, the silicone will fill this detail and create an absolute locking point. And these are very cool. Sometimes I use these just in the corner, other times I use them elsewhere. Now, for the rest, I'm going to go with the handle of this brush. I'm going to put some locking points inside the eye sockets. All right, simply like so. I'm going to go down as straight as possible, and to do this, you see, if I go in from the front, whoops, I'm sorry. If I go in from the front, I'll be too close to the bone. If I go in at the back of the eye socket right here, I'll be going down, I'll be entering just about in the center. I'm going one on this side. I'm going to make one on the other side. Now I'm going to enhance these because it's a large area. I think, no, I'm going to leave them the size that they are. I'm going to leave those the size they are. At the rear of the skull, I'm going to use the wooden modeling tool, and I'm going to create a divot on one side, and now on the opposite side. And yes, you can see the clay being pushed out here, but that's okay, just push back. It'll firm it right back up. These can be redone after the walls are in place. Now, at the front of the skull here, we're going to go in with the tip of the brush handle on each side. Okay. And at the back of the skull, I'm putting in a couple of small divots with the brush handle. Now, I'm going to take a modeling tool. This is a Kemper tool, W26. As you can see, it has a, well, let's do it this way so you can see it. All right. Let me get a focus here so you can make out what the shape is. Here we go. It's a small loop wire tool, very small. There's my finger. Okay, it gives you an idea how small the tip is. I'm going to go along now, and I'm going to create some channels, locking channels. I'm going to go along the outside rim around the eye socket, the zygomatic bone. I'm going to go in one more time, make it a little deeper. Don't try and dig in all at one time with the modeling tool. You will run into problems in that. I'll make sure that you guys can see what I just did. You want to take away a little bit at a time, all right? Just a wee bit of clay at a time. And you're creating a nice, even channel. I'm going to do it to the other side as well. You go in lightly at first. Come up. Let's turn it so you can see. There we are. Very nice. You go through again. Just taking out a little bit of clay at a time. And one more for good measure. Try and keep it even. Try and keep the depth of the channel even. There we go. Now, we've got a nice set of channels, locking channels on either side. Put the excess clay back into the warming bin. Here's what we've got so far. We have locking keys at the corners. We have little divots, 2 at the rear, 2 larger ones at the rear, 2 smaller ones at the front, and of course we have the 2 smaller divots made with the same paintbrush handle on the inside of each eye socket. Now I'm thinking this could use something else at the front to keep this locked in place. So I think I'm going to create another channel, but I'm going to go with a smaller modeling tool. I'm going to go with the Kemper Tools number W21. The W21. Again, it's a small tip. It's a W21. Okay? And we're just going to go straight across the front. All right. Let's do this like so. Trying to do this so my hand doesn't interfere with the viewing. Let's put the flat side of the modeling tool towards the skull. This way we don't bunk it with this side as we come by. We don't bang into it and disturb the line we're putting in. I'm going to start with a short line first and make it fairly shallow, like so. And again, a little deeper. And again, a little deeper still. There. Now we have a nice locking line in front. Now I'm going to work this a little bit. I'm going to go from the center and I'm going to head toward the corner key. From the center, I'm going to head toward the corner key on the opposite side. Now these small wire tools are very, very sensitive. If you press too hard, they will kind of bend on you. Now, there is a magical way to clean that up. Well, not magic really, but you know. We can take another paintbrush handle, smaller size than we've been using. Dip it in alcohol. Bang off the excess. Lightly enter this into the channel. Draw it across the entire length. Light pressure as you go. Now smooth the edges that turned up. Dip a brush in alcohol. Smooth it as it goes by. Smooth the whole thing as it goes by. Now with the bristles dipped in alcohol, into the channel, clean it up. Clean it up. When you're working in tight quarters like this, sometimes you need to go back over something and, you know, work it a little more. Just work it until you get it right, until you get it nice and smooth and consistently even. Now with the brush, we're going to go through the side channels again. We'll smooth them with the alcohol. Now we'll let this set up. And I think I'm going to make one more locking channel, this time at the back of the clay, located here at the back of the skull. Again, we're going to use the Kemper tool W26, the tool with the round, small round wire loop. And I'm just going to make a short little channel between the two divots that were made with the handle of the paintbrush. You can't really have too many key and locking points on these things. Just use common sense when you create these. Don't put them too close to the subject being molded. Don't go crazy with them all over the place. A little alcohol on a brush to smooth them, further shape them, make them nice. There we go. We have a nice set of channels, locking points, and locking keys. I'd say this skull is ready for the next step.